to introduce our speaker, a wonderful human being, Ginny.
Thank you, Kim. My name is Ginny Peacock, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Ginny. Hi, everybody. I'm here because I don't want to drink again, and I want a better life. And thank you, Shirley, for asking me to talk tonight. I appreciate that. It's a great honor and privilege to speak anywhere, to even be invited anywhere, so thank you. And that was a very nice introduction. I've not always been a decent human being. I'd like to welcome the new people that are here tonight. I hope you'll hear something from me that will help you want to come back. If not, come tomorrow and you will hear something that will hopefully make you want to stay here. So if you are new, all I can say, the two most important words in Alcoholics Anonymous are stay here. So I hope that you'll stay. My story begins in Indiana, which is why I tell people anyone that was born in Indiana would probably drink. I was born in a little town of 6,000 white people. It was called Kendallville, Indiana, and it was 24 miles north of Fort Wayne on Highway 3. There was a water tower that said, "The world takes what Kendallville makes." My mother was a realtor, and she was chairman of the Republican Party for Noble County. I know. My father was the town drunk. The whole town went to the basketball game on Friday night and cheered for the local basketball team. And my father was like Dennis Hopper, who came to the games drunk and wandered out on the floor and things like that. You know, the total embarrassment, the drunk. My brother was a basketball star. He had red hair, so we called him Pinky. And I was a cheerleader, so I was in my glory in high school. I don't really remember my first drink. I know I grew up in bars where my father drank cases of Drury's beer. Our whole family drank. I mean, you came to our house, you had a drink. And I think I probably drank a Drury's beer with my neighborhood friend Sandy Eddie. We would turn the lights out on my dad and then drink his beer, and he wouldn't notice because he would be passed out. And I was a great student, and when I was in high school, it kind of all began. And, I tell a drunkalogue. I'm not one of these speakers that says, "I'm not going to tell you a drunkalogue," and then they always do. So I'm just... So I'm just going to tell you right off. I'm going to tell my drunkalogue. So I heard a speaker say years ago that the farther you are away from your last drunk, the closer you are to the next one. And it has nothing to do with how long sober you are. If I'm not talking about my last drunk or talking about my drinking or how horrible it was, or the institutions, the jails, all of that, I'm close to picking up a drink. So if I'm not speaking or I'm not working with newcomers and telling them, obviously I'm going to tell you my drunk log, so that's enough of that. In high school, some of the guys on the football team, me and a couple other women, we got drunk and we decided that we would spray paint KHS, Kendallville High School, KHS, class of 60 on a bridge viaduct. And I was actually the one that drew the short straw. So I was suspended by my ankles. The guys held me up with a can of paint and I painted upside down. KHS, class of 60. We thought it was fabulous. But it set off a wave of the other classes started spray painting things like barns and sides of houses, and that was disturbing to the community. So the coaches overheard the football players talking, so he told the superintendent, our parents were all called in. We sat around in a big circle. We were horrible students for doing that. They took away our driver's licenses. They took away my pom-poms, and they said, "You're a disgrace to the student body. You cannot be a cheerleader anymore." So I got irritated. So I started smoking cigarettes and drinking 3-2 beer, and I had an old 49 Plymouth, and I would just drive around and smoke and drink. And I said to my mother, I'm going to leave this hick town and I ain't never coming back. And that was 1960. So I went away to college, at Indiana University, and I was still there when I got sober in 1974. So before I left to go to college, my family doctor, Dr. Messer, said, Virginia, I'm going to give you something that will help you study. You can only buy NoDoz in the store, so I'm going to give you a prescription for ephedrine. I said, oh, okay, Dr. Messer, thank you. So I filled the prescription, I went off to college, and I became a Tridelt, a Delta, Delta, Delta. And we had a cooler in our room, and we drank beef eaters, and we drank whatever we wanted to. And I had a sorority sister who had worked in a pharmacy in Downers Grove, Illinois, and she said, if you can get a prescription pad from the doctor's office, I can write them, and we can take them, and we can sell them. So I went away to the campus doctor, and when they stick you in that room for a half an hour, I stole not only the prescription pads, but a physician's desk reference. So I had pictures of all the pills, and it came in handy later, I must say. I have a lot of drugs in my story, but I also have a lot of alcohol, and alcohol is my drug of choice. So, but it was the 60s, and I don't know where you were, but I can't even remember where I was, but it was they'd say if you remember the 60s, you weren't there, so. Karen, we found that we took a fancy to speed, so Benzodil, Dexedrine, Disoxin, all those kinds of pills were what we wrote prescriptions for. So studying was a lot of fun. College was fun. We could go off to class, taking speed, sucking our mouths, and coming back at 4 or 5 and starting to drink again. And we would drink all night and stay up and smoke cigarettes and just carry on. I started getting in trouble because I didn't know that you had to be in by a certain time. I mean, actually I knew, but I didn't care about getting in on a certain time. So I got in trouble with the Dean of Women's Students, but I didn't really much care. Karen, my sorority sister, the pharmaceutical one, Karen and I dated these 2 guys who were Phi Gams, I think. And we used to go out with them and drink beer, and we would stack beer bottles up in a cornfield and shoot them. They had a gun, so then we would shoot the bottles. That's recreation in Indiana. So, Karen, this is long before students had guns and were shooting up, the high school. It was college, and, we're hicks in Indiana. So Karen took the gun back to the Tridelt house, and she got very drunk one night and was going up and down the halls brandishing that gun, and it upset a lot of people. So, so they called the alums over, and the alums came, and they said, Virginia, give us Karen's gun. I said, I'm not going to do that. You'll lift her pin. And they said, no, we won't lift her pin. Just give us the gun. So I gave them the gun, and they lifted her pin, told her she had 24 hours to get out of the house. Well, that really irritated me. So I quit the Tridelt house, and I moved off campus, and I took 9 of my sorority sisters with me. I changed my major from speech and hearing therapy to Slavic languages and literatures. Oh, thank you. So I got a job in the local campus bar called Nick's English Hut, and it's still there today. And in the front of the bar was a big round table, sort of like the round table at the Algonquin Hotel in New York. It was a big round table. All these guys came in every day, the guys that I thought were the ones you had to know. And They all had beards and they all rode motorcycles. So I thought, oh, cool. So I got a motorcycle and I started hanging out with them. And they were reading things like Aldous Huxley, Doors of Perception, and LSD, lysergic acid, diethylamide had come out, and we were talking about that and doing that. And so I had a small bike, and I was out riding my motorcycle one night, and a woman in a really big bike cut me off, and I had to stop. And she got off her bike, and she strolled back towards me, and she said, I thought I was the only woman in this town that rode a motorcycle. And I said, well, obviously you're not. And I fell madly in love with her. And so it was 1962 or 63. And mind you, Ellen did not have a TV show then. There was no gay marriage, and it was the love that dare not speak its name. So Barbara and I fell madly in love. She shot dope, so she showed me how to do that, and so we did that. And then in 1964, I graduated from college, and my grandmother sent me a lot of money. I told them I was going to go study in Paris at the Sorbonne, and my family was so excited, you know, I'm the first one to go to college and blah, blah, blah. So I got all this money, and I said to Barbara, let's go to Paris, and we'll live like Gertrude and Alice. And that Gertrude, nobody knows who that is, but it was, I'm dating myself. Alice B. Toklas and Gertrude Stein were two lesbians that lived in Paris at the time of Hemingway and all of that. It was decadent. So Barbara and I took off to go to live in Paris, and we got over there, and she decided she really didn't want to be a lesbian. And I was sort of upset by this because, anyways, so we had this big fight. Barbara punched me out and flew back to Bloomington, Indiana, and I stayed there with all my money and called Maynard, my motorcycle mechanic, to come over. So he came over. It was 1964. We left London and we went up to Liverpool, and I bought him a big black Velocette motorcycle with black racing fairings, and it was the kind of motorcycle that you had to kick it to start it, and you wanted to get your leg out of the way. It would like break your calf in two. So it's not like the sissy bikes that you all ride now where you just turn a key. It was very butch, and I rather liked it. So we hung out with the rockers up at the Busy Bee Cafe up in Liverpool, and the mods were all in London with their short mini skirts, and that was not me. So Maynard and I went down to Spain, and I rented a 5-bedroom villa. I took in all these people, these gypsies, and we lived there, and Maynard left. He decided, I think, that he'd had enough of me, and he flew home, and he flew the motorcycle to Houston or somewhere. There was some sort of a strike going on. So he left, and then I came home a bit later, and Barbara, I went back to Bloomington, Indiana, and the year that she was gone and I was over there, she married a man named Junior Peacock. You're getting ahead of me. And so when I came home, she divorced him, so I married him. So we have a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous that we don't get the well ones here. So I married Junior, and we went down to southern Indiana to live off the land. Like, we were beatniks or hippies, and Junior and I bought 17 acres and a little house. It didn't have any running water, but he was going to get to it. That never happened. So Max and Linda lived over there, and this other couple lived over there, and we would get together at night and play mountain music, and we had dulcimers and kazoos, and I forget that other thing, spoons. We'd play spoons, and Linda and we both had looms, and so we'd be weaving, and it was just, but we had 17 acres, and so we decided that we would grow marijuana. So we did, and I got a job teaching school in Salem, Indiana, which was, I don't know how far away, but a ways, and I became a junior high school English teacher. So on the way to school, I would drink vodka, and I really prided myself because I would then use mouthwash like my dad used to do, and then I would open the door and spit, and I never got it on my skirt, and I was really proud of that. I only had one skirt, so I wore it every day to school, and sometimes I would change the top, just so I thought I was, confusing people. So I taught junior high school over there, and Junior and I lived in this, that was 1968. So from 1968 to 1974, when I got here, I never drew a sober breath unless I was locked up in a mental institution, incarcerated in jail, or locked in a psych ward somewhere. So I always like to talk about this part because it's not pretty, and if I were to drink again, I would go right back to this part from 68 to 74. So I had to drink on a daily basis. The guy that said, the man takes the drink, and then the drink takes the drink, and then the drink takes the man, and the drink took me. And I was completely addicted, physiologically, psychologically, to alcohol, and I had to have it every day. So I had it in my big purse. I always carried a big purse, and I always had a bottle of vodka in it. And I drank vodka because I knew you couldn't smell it. But I think if you drink a quart a day, you're going to smell it. So Junior and I, we're shooting speed every day, and we're drinking. And I'm going off to school, and he's hanging drywall very quickly. And so I began to have this affair with a professor's wife at Indiana University. So I would go off for groceries on Friday and come back on Tuesday. So the marriage wasn't really working out. Junior began to hit me, so I'm a battered wife. I'm still deaf in my left ear. And he would just beat on me all the time for nothing. And so one time he was just banging on me, and I just picked up lamps, whatever I could find, and broke out all the windows in the house. And we had like these 11 hens and one rooster, Donald the rooster. So with no glass in the windows, the chickens came into the house. And we had a mulberry tree, so the chickens ate the mulberries and shit purple all over the house. And we were just sitting in there, shooting up and drinking, and that was my marriage life. And I would go off to school, and I would stand outside my 7th grade English class every day, and Mr. Hunt, the principal, would come up, and he would look at me. My face is black and blue, and I'm sure I stunk. And he would say, "Are you all right, Miss Peacock?" And I would say, "Yes, Mr. Hunt." And he would say, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes, Mr. Hunt, I'm okay." And I left there and went back home to Kendallville, where my parents were, and I continued to drink. And my father became very sexually abusive with me, and I knocked him out of a chair, and the next thing I know, I'm being handcuffed by a sheriff, and my mother is saying, "It's for your own good, honey." And she had just committed me to a mental institution called Oaklawn, which is over by South Bend, Mishawaka. So I went over there, and I think I was there for like 9 months, and I had no shock treatments, which I'm grateful for. But it was insane. I could tell you about the fun times at the mental institution, but I was finally released. They said I didn't respond to treatment, and I went back to Bloomington, Indiana, because if you were going to be gay in the state of Indiana, it was the only place to live. So I went back to Bloomington. I moved in with about 6 drag queens. I got a job in a Catholic school teaching 7th and 8th grade English. The principal's name was Sister Rose Claire, and she hated me, that's all I can say. Because I would take my class out to the playground and we would do action photos, and I was teaching photography. I was just teaching stuff that had nothing to do with what my lesson plans were. Those teachers would pick me up in the morning. It was a pool of teachers, and I would get in the car with an open can of beer and a half pint of vodka. And nobody said, Virginia, should you really be drinking at this hour? If you even questioned me, I would have you in tears before we even got to the corner. Because I had a mouth on me. I'd learned to do more than just hang up those drag queens' dresses. I talked like they did, and I was vicious. And so people just left me alone. So I quit that job teaching in the parochial school because I heard that they were looking for women to do non-traditional roles, and they wanted a bus driver for the city of Bloomington. So of course I applied. And I drank, my route was from downtown Bloomington out to the mall, and I drank on the bus. I didn't care. And I would show up. My friend Melanie ran the switchboard for the city, so she would call me like at 4 or 5 in the morning to get up, to get on the, to go drive out to the municipal building and get on my bus and go drive the route. And so I would realize when I woke up that I had nothing to drink, and so I would just grab another shirt. So when the bus got out to the mall, I would go into the mall restroom, take off the Bloomington Transit shirt, put on the other shirt that I brought, then go back into the Super X Drugs, and I would buy a quart of vodka. And the women in there would say, "Oh, Virginia, you're not driving today?" I'd say, "No, this is my day off." So I would then stop at Orange Julius and get a large cup of just ice and a straw and a lid, go back into the bathroom, into the stall, pour the vodka over the ice, put the lid on, and I would, take a few swallows, and I was at peace. Then I would take that shirt off, put on the Bloomington Transit shirt, and get back on my bus. And I drove, drinking. I put that big old glass cup right up on the dash. I had my tape deck, and I had two tapes, Olivia Newton-John and the Brandenburg Concertos. So as the day went on, the music got louder and louder, and people would say, "Slow this bus down," and I would just brake real hard because they're like, "Oh." And it was winter, and the thing that I like to remember was just how awful I was. It was snowing, it was probably 15 degrees below zero, and I would see these 2 women up ahead. They were at the mall. I couldn't stand them. They always talked, and they always wanted to sit behind me and talk, and they made my hair hurt, and I was just like, oh. So I would see them, and I would change the sign up, and I would say, garage, out of service. And I would pull up, and then I would open the door, and they would say, "What's wrong, Virginia?" I said, "I have to take my bus in, but yours will be along any minute." And I knew there wouldn't be another bus for 45 minutes. But I didn't care if they were cold. I didn't care anything about them. I didn't care anything about myself. And I would just pull off ahead, put my feet up on the dash, and play my music and drink. And, I have to think what I was going to say about that bus. Anyway, the thought that I'm old, so I lose track of time and things. So I got a job. Oh, I know, I was working on the bus. I went out, I must have gone out some night to get something at McDonald's. And on the way back from McDonald's to my house, I was in my car, not the bus. And I hit like 8 parked cars. I hit a telephone pole. I put all the power out on the north side of Bloomington. and I was still driving, and I took the corner off the side of a house, and I was stuck in the front yard, so I put it into reverse to get out of there. And a man came out, and it was the fire chief, and he was inside having coffee with his mother. So he radioed ahead to everybody, and so I took off, and I went back to my house. I parked, here come all the red lights, and I got out of my car, and I ran to the front door, and I was arrested, and my girlfriend came out of the house, and they arrested her for interfering in my arrest. They took me down to the drunk tank. I had a blood alcohol count of 3.1 or something. So I got out of the drunk tank, and I went home, and I didn't have a car anymore, so I got a bicycle, and I got a bicycle with a basket, and I would drive my bicycle down to Brent's liquor store, which is in the south end of Bloomington, and when it was the first liquor store that opened, and I would be there standing outside with all the homeless guys, all the other alcoholics, shaking, and I would go in and I would buy a big fifth of Gordon's vodka with the orange screw top, and I would go outside and I'd pass it around to all my buddies, and we'd all take a few chugs, and then I would put it in my basket, and I would go home, and I would just sit in my apartment trying to figure it out, what's going on here. And Sarah, my partner, called the doctors at the hospital. They were in part of the psych unit where I had been a visitor. So she called them and said, "What do I do with her? She's drinking. And they said, "Just keep her moving. Don't let her sleep." Well, Sarah took me down to Josette and Ludd's house. It was down near where I live with Junior, near West Baden and French Lick. And Josette and Ludd were curing cottage cheese, and it was like 115, and it was 115. It was horrid. So she's walking me up and down these bean fields because she knows that don't let her sleep. So I'm walking up and down the bean fields, and I'm crying, and the sweat is running off of me, and I just screamed out, "God help me! Somebody help me! I can't quit drinking." So I went back to Bloomington on Monday, and I went back to work. I'm not driving a bus anymore. They decided I would do better in the street department, painting curbs yellow. So we retired the bus, and I went to the street department, and I got my little yellow bucket of paint and my brush, and we would count 4 squares back from the corner and paint, and that was my job. And my crew took a break in a diner almost every day called Gibb and Denzel's, and they would stop for biscuits and gravy because that's what the blue-collar crowd loved to eat. So we went into Gibb and Denzel's, and there in the back of the restaurant was a woman whose name was also Virginia, and she said, "Ginny, sit down, sit down. I heard you were in the hospital." I said, "Yes, I was." And then it was just as if God, heard me when I cried out to him and tied a truce belt around me, and I just blurted out, "Virginia, I'm drinking again." And she said, "Oh, I know 2 women who went to Hazelden Treatment Center. They fell in love with each other. They divorced their husbands. They live here in town, and they started an AA meeting. Will you talk to them?" And I said, "Yes." So when I got home from work that night, the phone rang, and I said, "Hello," and this woman said, "Hi, my name's B. We've heard about you." And so B and Paula came to my house that night, and they said, "We're from Alcoholics Anonymous, and we know how you feel." And I considered those the 5 most important words anyone ever told me. We know how you feel. And they went on and on about not taking the first drink, and they'd been sober a couple of years without drinking, and I thought that was astounding. And so they said, "We'll come and get you Sunday night and take you to a meeting. It's at the Distinguished Alumni Room at Indiana University." I thought, well, finally. So I don't know if I drank from that Monday to that Sunday, but on that Sunday I woke up and I said to Sarah, "I'm going to that meeting tonight." And I went to that meeting, and that was July 13th, 1974, and I never took another drink. And I went, and there were like, there were 4 people in the room, and they were old people, old. They had blue rinses, and I thought I'd made a big mistake, but I went. I mean, I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't stay sober, and so I went to the meeting, and Bea and Paula were there, and they told me they were going to be my sponsors. I never knew you could choose, so they just were my sponsors, and they gave me a key. Well, we didn't last in that room long. We were soon in a church basement. So when we got to the church basement, they gave me a key, and they said, you're going to open the room every week, and you're going to make coffee, because service keeps you sober. So I believed them, and I've been doing it for 42 years, and I totally believe in service. And so I went to that meeting. I didn't say, wow, glad to find you. It's been rough out there. I just looked at them, and I just thought, So the 4 of them shared, and sometimes they got tired of each other. I never said a word. I never said a word my whole first year other than, I ain't going to buy this God crap in here. They talked about God all the time. And one of the little ladies said, well, you can borrow my higher power till you get one of your own. And another old lady said, well, you better get your own because mine's busy with me. So, so I started doing what they do. They got on their knees in the morning and they asked for help and they said thank you at night. So I started doing that. And I rode my bicycle to work 7 miles because I didn't have a car. And you know, I wouldn't even say the word God. I used to just say, to whom it may concern, I need help. And, you know, my old hippie, junkie, alky friends would come over to my house and they would see my 24-hour book. And they would go, oh, Peacock, are you praying now? And so I hid all my books from everyone because I just, they didn't understand, so I can say. So, trying to think. I decided that I was missing my peer group, people like me. So my mother bought me a car, a Dodge Aspen, and I had to pay. My sponsor said, you have to pay her for it. And I said, why? I've never had to pay her before. And they said, no, you're going to pay her now. When you write your checks the first of every month, you're going to send a check for, it was $25 or $50 or whatever I had to my mother. So I paid for that car. It didn't have a reverse, but it had, oh, that was a Javelin. She bought me a Javelin. That's what, it had no reverse. But I would use it to drive to Indianapolis, which was 60 miles away, and then turn around and come back. And so I went up there looking for my peer group, and I found it, a couple of them, at least one woman, and she said she would buy me a house if I moved to Indianapolis, so off I went. And I went to Indianapolis, and I had a house, and I got a job teaching school again, junior high school English. So that job was a riot. Trying to think what I did after that. My drinking, you know, just continued to stay with me, and I drank and I drank and I drank. When I'd been in Bloomington, I walked into the hospital there with a blood alcohol count of 0.489, and I was in the DTs for a week, 7 days and 7 nights, and then I was released. And then I moved up to Indianapolis, and then one day in the back of the Grapevine, Sarah and I saw what lists all the conventions. It had a gay convention in San Francisco, Living Sober. And so I said, let's go. So we went to the conference in San Francisco, loved it, came back to Indianapolis. I was wearing a 1978 Living Sober t-shirt. It didn't say anything about gay or anything, and I wore it over to the clubhouse where I went to meetings, and there was a guy there, and Jack, I didn't care for him, but he turned to the guy next to him and said, you know, Tobe, there was a parade last weekend in San Francisco. I was there, and it was like 200,000 queers marching in a parade, and about 200,000 people went to look at them goddamn queers. And I think my face got very red, and he said, when were you in San Francisco? I said, I was there last week. He said, well, I didn't see you. And I said, well, we must have gone to different meetings. So I went, I recoiled as if from a hot flame, and I went to the back where I was sitting, and I said to this woman next to me, Lee, she taught over at the university, and I said, oh, I hate that SOB. He just made fun of queers and blah, 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 and she said, well, maybe it's time that you do something about it. So we started talking, and we decided that we would have a gay meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it would meet in my house. And everybody that was interested come on Sunday night, and it was very whisper. So they came on Sunday night, and so many people came that the house literally sank. And it went down, and we could not get the front door open to let people out. So, so Dee the dyke was there, and she had a screwdriver in her back pocket. So she took it out and took the hinges off so people could leave. So they left. And then we decided, well, we can't meet here anymore, so we went to churches. So we would sit up in a panel like this in front of the church. There were 4 of us. And we would tell them, you know, that we wanted to have a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the church people would say, well, we think it's nice that you kids want to do something about your drinking problem, but what about your other problem? And we said, well, we don't think it's a problem. And they said, well, we do, and you are not welcome here. So we went to about 4 or 5 churches. We were not welcome. So we went to the women's bookstore, and they took us. So we had a meeting at the women's bookstore. And then I left in 1979. I up and moved across country with a friend who's actually here tonight to San Francisco. And actually spending a day in a spending 5 days or 6 days in a U-Haul truck with me was a bit much for her. And when we got there, she wasn't speaking to me. We would play all these games in the truck, and she said I cheated. I probably did. So I got to San Francisco and moved right into the Castro. I wrote back to my students and told them why I'd left. I said, I can no longer live a lie. I'm moving to San Francisco so that I can be out as a lesbian. And they wrote back, Dear Mrs. Peacock, we already knew. So I guess it wasn't a big secret. So I stayed in San Francisco until 2003 when I moved to Palm Springs. And while I was in San Francisco, I was very, very active in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got H&I commitments. I'm an H&I person. From the time I was 2 years sober, including today, I've always had an H&I commitment. I absolutely love it, and it keeps my memory green, so I love to go. In Indianapolis, I went to the girls' school and to the women's prison. So when I got to San Francisco, I went right away to the business meeting for H&I. And then Irwin told me that they didn't give me a commitment right away. He said, you were too sick. And I said, I was 5 years sober. What do you mean I was too sick? So they finally gave me a commitment at the psych ward in the hospital in San Francisco. So that was my commitment, and I loved it. I would go with some guy I didn't know, and we would sit and tell our stories. And then the people would just get up and walk out. They would just walk out while you're talking. their pants would fall down, and they would just leave. And then they come back in, you got a cigarette? You got a cigarette? And we're still telling our story, and that's what we did. And I actually rather liked it. Then I got into going to prisons, and I went to Vacaville for 15 years with Irwin, and then I wanted to go into San Quentin, and Marcel said, it's booked. And she put me on a waiting list. I was on a waiting list for 10 years to get into Quentin, which is not anything that everybody else wants to do, but I wanted to get into Quentin. So I finally got into San Quentin, and I went in for 10 years, and it was really my favorite meeting that I've ever gone to. And the guys that were in there were all in there, most of them for life with no possible chance of parole. And so the meetings that we had were really, really good. And they would talk about doing a fourth and fifth step in the yard, and they did everything verbally. Nobody wanted to put anything in writing. And understood. So in 2000, I came down to Palm Springs, honestly, because in 1999, the front page of the New York Times, on the front page banner, it said, Palm Springs, the next gay Mecca. And so I thought, oh, well, let's go. So my broker, I worked in the Caldwell Banker office, and my broker came down first, bought a place, and in 2000, I came down and bought a house in Palm Springs. And then in 2003, I just up and moved here, and I've been here ever since. And I love the desert. I mean, I really like it. I'm still a realtor, like 36 years later. I was a realtor in San Francisco for 22 years, so I had a very good, lucrative career, where things today are selling for $16,000 price per square foot. And here they're about $250, so it was a little different. But anyway, I came here, and I got right back into H&I work again, and today I'm the panel captain at Betty Ford, and I really like that one because it's clean, and it's not a jail, it's not a prison. And up until Hazelton bought them, and you had to get in with cash, everybody came in was pretty, and they had their teeth, and they didn't even look like alcoholics. They were pretty, and they had blonde ponytails and skinny clothes and jeans, and not like the crowd that I'd been used to. So then when the insurance took over, and Hazelton came and bought them out, and they take insurance, the demographic has totally changed. But it's still great. It's still like my favorite meeting of the month. I love to go, and I love H&I work. It keeps my memory green. I've been locked up in jails, mental institutions, psych wards, and I love to go there. And the clients that get up to share, we only share for half the hour, then the clients come down to the podium and share, so they get used to sharing at an AA meeting. And I sit there, and it's good. They don't have a story yet. They're new. They just got off the bus. Some of them, are leaving, so they come down and cry and say goodbye to everybody. It's a very good, I love going there. It's my favorite meeting of the month. So the guy that I have gone with for the last 3 years, Dan S., he always gets up at every meeting and says, I was told there were 3 things you had to have in order to stay here. 1 is a sobriety date, 2 is a sponsor, and 3 is a home group. And so, I have a sobriety date of July 13th, 1974. I have a sponsor today, Susie A. from Palm Desert. And I have a home group. Actually, I have a couple home groups. Probably Sunny Dunes is my home group in Palm Springs. I go to a lot of meetings there because it's convenient, really, and it's by my house. What it's like now, what is it like now? It's pretty great. I mean, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. So when I got to AA, all I had was, I weighed 185 pounds. My teeth were rotten, they were brown, and I stuttered all the time, and I fell over all the time. So I was always falling over with yellow paint, and I stutter. And people, when they talked in Bloomington, Indiana, when they would start to share, they would say, "Hi, my name's Mike, and I'm an alcoholic, sober today through the grace of God and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since June 1, 1950, and for that I'm eternally grateful." And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, and it took me a year before I even said my name's Ginny and I'm an alcoholic, because I couldn't say all that. I couldn't remember all that they said all the time. And then I've gone to Dallas a couple times to speak, and they do that same thing down there. I'm like, oh, it's crazy. I've been sober 42 years. I'm very grateful for all the sponsorship that I've had. The two women, Bea and Paula, that 12-stepped me at my house. When I moved to Indianapolis, I got Iris Byrne and her husband. She was married to Bob Byrne. They had come here from the Huntington group in Long Island, and it was with her that I did my first 4th step. And I was really grateful for it. It took me 3 years to do a 4th step, so don't take that long if you're new here. It was the best I could do. I've had a series of sponsors over the years. Clancy was my sponsor for like 10 years, and I heard Peg M speak at his birthday, and I asked her if she would be my sponsor when I was at that meeting, and she said yes. And she said, what's going on? And I said, well, I just moved to Palm Springs and nobody likes me. And even my gardener gave me the key back. He didn't like the way I talked to him. And I said, I'm having a lot of trouble with people. And she said, okay, good, here's the 7 questions. You go home, write the answers, and call me. And so I did just that, and she was very helpful. And then maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I was in my real estate office in Rancho Mirage at the Sotheby's office, and my broker, Diana, she'd been my broker at Windermere and the other offices as well. I sort of followed her around, and we talked about God all the time. She would ask me to come in, and we would, she wanted to know what was going on with my deals and transactions, and then we would talk about God. She went to the Destiny Church, and she was just on fire with God, and I could, of course, talk about AA and God. There's nothing I'd rather talk about more than God, and so we would sit and talk about God and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm in the Rancho Mirage office, and she came to my office and knocked on the door and said, may I see you? I went, sure. So I went to her office, and she said, close the door. So now I'm starting to get a little nervous. So I closed the door, and I sat down on the other side of her desk. She leaned across her desk, and she said, are you going to enough meetings? And I thought, she doesn't even belong to the program. And I said, why? I said, is my behavior bad? And she said, very. And I went, ugh. So she said, not only are the agents in here complaining about you, but I'm getting calls from outside. So I said, oh. And she said, well, do you have a sponsor? I said, yes, but she doesn't live here. And then I said, well, maybe I ought to get one that lives here that can see how I act, and if she doesn't see it, she'll at least hear about it. So I called Susie and asked her to be my sponsor, and she's been my sponsor since I've been here. So for that, I'm very grateful. My sponsor will tell me, when I'm out of line, et cetera, et cetera. So I go to her house for sponsorship meetings, and I actually have them in my house, too, once a month for the kids I sponsor, both women and men. And this year, we're doing the 12 and 12 book. Last year, we did a new pair of glasses, or we did Drop the Rock, and we sometimes do the big book, sometimes we do a new pair of glasses, et cetera. So it's a good time to get together with all of the kids at one time, do the readings, and talk and share, because it's a safe place, so people can say things there that they might feel funny talking about in a general meeting. So I love that. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Some of the best things that have happened to me, my mother died in 1985, I think it was, or 86, I can't remember exactly, but I hated my mother. My mother was 25 pages of my fourth step. I hated her. I hated her money. I hated her because she never touched me. She never told me she loved me. She would just throw money at me. And after I did a fourth step, my sponsor said to me, Ira said, well, you got the only mother you got. It's just not the one that you wanted. So she's going on your eighth step, and you're going to be making amends to her for as long as she's alive. So I did just that, and I would go to Florida to see my mother, and I would leave the clothes at home, you know, the jeans that had the ass out and the knees out, and I would wear little skirts and things that would make her happy. And I quit saying the F word, every fourth word out of my mouth. So I actually went and made amends to my mother for being a really bad daughter. I was bad. I mean, I was a brat. I'm like the little Orphan Annie poem about the little girl that was so bad. I was bad. I was bad to my family. My family was enormous. I mean, they were huge people, and my mother took Christmas trees, little pills, and my father took Nebutol and Seconal and downers. And so before I would ever go back to the Tridout house, I would just pour everything out, right? I mean, the kids at the Tridout house loved me because I always brought back all those pills, and they just came out of my parents' medicine cabinet. My mother got sick in Florida, and she actually had her leg amputated, and I called my brother down who lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He too is a Republican, and his wife sells Mary Kay. So he came. I didn't even know how to talk to him. I mean, my own brother. I didn't know how to talk. Whenever Christmas there was a gathering, I asked my mother, what does Bill want? I would never talk to him. We never talked like a brother and sister. So I called him and said, you better come down. I don't think Mom's going to leave the hospital. So he came, and she didn't leave the hospital. And we had to unplug her, and before she died, she said, you've been a good daughter. I knew I hadn't. I mean, I used to call my mother and tell her, I would be mad at her and say, I'm going to New York for an abortion, and then I'd just slam the phone down. And my mother would be tearing her hair out for weeks, calling every hospital in New York, seeing if I was there. And I was just a brat. I was a spoiled brat, awful. I seemed to attract a lot of them as sponsees as well. There's a few here tonight, right? So, I feel sometimes like I got sober just to make amends to my mother, because I was such a bad person. I've made a lot of amends in AA. I've learned, too, that because I saw it when I was in my first year of sobriety, I went to Chicago to see all my famous drag queen friends, and I went to the mustard seed meeting, which was in a church basement in Chicago, and everybody sat in rows, and they passed a microphone on a long extension cord. They would say something in it, and then they would pass it, and then back. And the guy in front of me, it got to him, and he said, my name's Eddie, I'm a street dude, and what else did he say? I'm a street dude, and I'm an alcoholic. And every time I look up front at that podium and it has an A and an A on it, I don't just think Alcoholics Anonymous, I think accept and adjust. I gotta accept what God gives me every day, and I gotta adjust my thinking and my behavior to it. And then he passed it to me, and I was like, wow. I mean, I thought that was really great, and so I have to accept and adjust a lot. I believe totally in a God that got me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and Alcoholics Anonymous got me to God. So if you're new here and you're having a problem with the word, just, they used to say put 2 O's in it and be it. It can be a group of drunks, it can be good orderly direction, but there is a power greater than you. So, and there's a line in the big book that says most old timers will say that God is the most important thing in their life today. And I've got to say that it is. My sponsor says all the time, God's in charge, and God really is in charge. I was at Sober in the Sun on Mother's Day in Palm Springs, and the theme of the conference was the broad highway. And so I did a workshop on the road narrows, as the road narrows. And so the road really does narrow, not only with the number of people on it, but what it's really all about. It's really a lot about love, it's about forgiveness, and it's about service. And I asked my sponsor what she thought it meant, and she said, you get to the solution a lot quicker. You get to the answer sooner when the road narrows. And I thought that was really good, so I was going to give her credit for that. But that's what I told them at the workshop, too. My sponsor says, right. And we know the answer sooner as the road narrows. So, the road narrows. My life is great today. God seems to keep testing me physically. I had a lot of car accidents when I was drinking. I think I had 14. I broke all the bones on the right side of my face. I had my face rebuilt, blah, blah, blah. 1997, I broke my neck sober in a car accident south of San Francisco, and I had a halo drilled into my skull. So I was still a realtor, and people had to drive me. I called taxis. I took buses with this halo. I loved it because Clancy was my sponsor at the time, and I said, Clancy, I broke my neck, and I got a halo in my skull. And he said, take a picture, kid. It's the only halo you were ever going to wear. He was always good at good orderly direction, right? I love that. And I've had probably 10 knee surgeries. I was not born with good knees. And 3 or 4 years ago, I had breast cancer. And a couple years after that, I was misdiagnosed. The doctors said, rheumatologist, that I had polymyalgia, and the only thing you could take for that is prednisone. I said, I don't want to take that. That killed my mother. And they said, well, you can take that or methotrexate. Methotrexate is chemo. So they put me on both of them, and I was never so sick in my life as I was on that chemo. But I got off of that. I found a new doctor who actually took some x-rays, which the other doctors had not done, and found that I only had tendinitis. So I threw out all those pills. Get a second opinion. Yeah. Right. I write a gratitude list every day. When Peg was my sponsor, they started a gratitude list in Bellevue and on the internet. And when I got down here, I started a PS Gratitudes at yahoogroups.com. And it was all of my sponsees on it, but other people have gotten on it too. So gratitude to me is probably one of the best things about Alcoholics Anonymous, because a grateful heart will never drink, and gratitude and resentment can't occupy the same space, so I can't be really mad at somebody and grateful. So sometimes I write a gratitude list more than once a day if I'm having a particularly bad day. So that's been very helpful to me. I mean, I'm trying. I love my life today. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what I would do. I'm still a realtor here, and I've been a realtor here for 14 years, and I've pretty much always had a partner in real estate, just because it's easier, and you can pass the baby. If you're having a hard time with a client, you can pass the baby to somebody else, and maybe they have a better connection. last summer, I got a new knee. I bought a new knee in June, and I'd already had the right one done, so I had the left one done. And a week before my surgery, my business partner quit. She didn't like the way Sotheby's, that's why I was treating her. She felt victimized, whatever. So she quit, and I said, well, this is a really inconvenient time to quit. I mean, I'm having surgery next week. And she said, well, I'll stay if you want me to. I said, no, I don't want you to stay, not with that attitude, so bye-bye, Felicia, and she left. And so I was home, I had the knee surgery, and then this woman named Carol T. Started bringing me food at my house, and then I said, you still have your license? She said, yes. And I said, well, why don't you be my partner? And she said, okay. So that's been going on for a year, and it's been really great. But I have to tell you how great it is because of what Alcoholics Anonymous did. About 9 years ago, I took Carol. We used to work in the same office at Coldwell Banker. We had different offices. I was over here with Philip, and she was over here with Brian. And she was drinking, like, a lot. So she would walk by my office in the morning, and I would just smell her, and I'd just be like, whoo. I said, and I started with, I'm saving you a seat. I'm saving you a seat now. And some days she would come in, and I would say, do you have an iron? Do you own an iron? And I'm like, which is unusual for me to say when people called me the big wrinkle when I drove a bus. So one day she said to me, will you take me to a meeting? Because you always heard me talking about Alcoholics Anonymous in there. So I said, sure. So I took her to Sunny Dunes, which was at the time behind the Steinmart. And I took her to the meeting, and she seemed to like it. And I took her to a few more. And then she started to get really popular. In fact, they liked her better than they did me. So I got very jealous, and I got a resentment. So I absolutely just pulled away, like dumped her, just nothing. No more contact. And so I never spoke to her. Maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 years later, I don't know how long I'd been a bad alcoholic. I left a meeting at Sunny Dunes, and I went outside, and she was sitting on the steps by herself. And I was so bad, I didn't even say, hi, is everything all right? I just gave her a dismissive nod, like, wouldn't even say anything, I just nod. And I got to my car, and I don't know what, it must have been God, because I turned around, and I went back, and I said, I owe you an amends. My behavior has been awful. I have no reason other than I was jealous. And I said, I hope you'll forgive me. And then we hugged and blah, blah, blah. And so, for a few years, then I would actually say, hi, Carol, and, how are you? My behavior got a bit better. And actually, she's the one who works with me today. She's the one who, out of nowhere, brought me food after I had my surgery, and there was nobody else in my house but my dogs, and they couldn't do anything. So Carol started bringing me food and feeding the dogs and doing all of that. So if it weren't for Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have never made a 10th step. I would have never thought about even doing that. I would have taken it to my grave, So the program works in my life all the time, all the time. And it makes me a better person, so I'm grateful for that. I went to a meeting in Indianapolis where Betsy P. used to go. We went every Friday night. We would open it with a Serenity Prayer, close it with the Lord's Prayer, and then you could leave when you wanted to, and it went on for hours. And we would talk about our week and what we did to get through the week, etc. And Becky used to say, I didn't come to AA to build my character. And I used to go, yeah, she was my hero. And I'm like, I didn't come here to build my character either. I'd always like have to copy her. And actually, after 42 years, my character has changed, and I've built a better character because of Alcoholics Anonymous and because of the steps. and because of the traditions. You know, I'm a better person today than I was when I got here. I'm still not very good, but I'm a lot better than I was when I got here. Life is good. I live alone in Palm Springs with 2 rescued greyhounds, Priscilla and Nina, and Priscilla's in hospice, but we're spoiling her. So, you know, I'm still a realtor. I have a great life. I go to a lot of meetings. The only thing that I can tell you that I know for sure is that my name is Ginny Peacock, and I'm an alcoholic. Sober today through the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since July 13, 1974, so thank you for the love.